Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Y Exchange. Thanks for showing up. I know, the very soothing music indeed. Just wanted people to ease into the space. I know we've been in the Zoom universe for quite some time. But as always, it's just such a pleasure to see everyone here, to come together through art and science and to bridge these two artists here today. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from Michael Koehle and Mariel Pettee, and we're just going to see a little bit about their work in these two sort of lightning talks, 25-minute presentations, followed by a Q&A. Now, I just want to give everyone a heads up that this event is a recorded event. We do publish this on our Y Exchange page, so please, if that makes you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, please let me know. I do the recording at the end. I will also follow up with any resources, any links that videos that we get to see today during our talk. So don't fret if you didn't capture everything that you saw. I also want to say that we'll hold all the questions for the time being to the end, right after the presentations. So if you do have questions as they come up during the talks, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then after we're done with the presentations, we'll pick on you and we can have this conversation back and forth with the artists. I really do encourage everyone here to see the work side by side, to also be able to ask both artists questions about their work. So some of these, as you see these presentations, you'll see some crossover, some things that blend into the other. So I just, have a chance to think about what brings these artists together in this space. What else can I say? The last thing is that Y Exchange is co-presented by Kinetech Arts, ODC Theater, and the Jurassic Residence Artist Program. And we've been doing this for quite some time, since 2014, believe it or not. And we've been featuring artists from all over the world, across all kinds of disciplines. And it's just been a really unique space to bridge people together. So if you have people that are interested in this event, please just let us know. We're close at hand. You contact us at info@kinetecharts.org, or just directly message me and I'll connect you. I will say that our co-presenters are here in the audience. We're here with Kinetech Arts, ODC Theater, and the Jurassic Residence Artist Program. I want to give them all a chance to just say a brief little description. So, Dai, are you here? Where are you, Dai?
I'm here. Hello.
There she
Hi.
is. Can you say a little bit about Kinetech Arts?
Yes, thank you everybody for being here today. So lovely to see your faces. I think most of you know about Kinetech Arts. I'm going to keep it very brief. So we started Kinetech Arts in 2013. So next year we're going to turn 10, which is very exciting. And we start with our labs, which we always do on Wednesday nights. And Y Exchange, we usually do on the last Wednesday of the month. Well, sometimes it changes, but most of the times last Wednesday of the month. And as Alice has said already, we've been featuring lots and lots and lots of artists from all over the world, especially during the pandemic. We got this opportunity to feature our friends from all over the world. So stay tuned for the next one next month. And so, yeah, if you would like to participate in our labs, please send us a message in the chat. We're going to connect, and then you can come research, share about your work, do some dance course, all kinds of stuff happening in the lab. And we'll do lots of performances, and there's a very exciting performance coming soon, which is going to be in October in Oakland, so stay tuned. Mariel is actually going to be performing with us and showing some of her work as well. So I hope that you can join us in October. And Our first presenter today, no, it's going to be Michael. Yeah, it's going to be Michael, but I would like to introduce Caterini first. Caterine Gallo, she's a development manager at Jurassic Resident Artist Program. She's just going to spend a few minutes just to tell you a little bit about Jurassic. I'll pass the ball to you, Caterini. You muted.
Yeah, I had to make her co-host. Hi, I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, now. There we go. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. And just to give you a little bit more information about Jurassic Resident Artist Program, we are the largest artist residency program here in the Western US, and it's located just about 35 miles south of the San Francisco Bay Area. And for over 40 years, the Jurassic program has offered the gift of time to artists in the form of month-long artist residencies. This is free of cost to the artists and includes chef-prepared meals for them during their time there. We offer these residencies for groups of 5 to 10 artists at a time. Since COVID, we've downsized to 5 groups just to be safe. And these artists apply from all over the world and from all different disciplines, similar with Kinetech Arts. And along the lines of Y Exchange, we also have a dual mission of not only enhancing the artist's creativity, but also preserving the land and environment that we're situated on. And we're just really thrilled to continue working on these monthly Y Exchange with Kinetech Arts.
Thank you. And I just put the link in the chat there for Jurassic. So if you're interested in looking into that, please do. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Caterine. Thank you. Actually, we're going to be there in September. I'm so excited. The best residency in the world. Seriously, guys, it's magical. It's so beautiful up there. If you get a chance to go, they have some trails that the public, it opens to the public, and there are sculptures and all kinds of arts in the trails. You can go in the trail and you can see the art. It's just a beautiful, magical place. All right, so exciting. I cannot wait to be back. So today we have 2 very special artists, Michael Koehle and Mariel Pettee. I'm very excited that they're going to share their beautiful work with all of you. Michael, we met at Jurassic, actually. We met at Jurassic. Michael, do you remember which year was that? Was it 2001?
19, I think.
19? Right before the pandemic. Oh, yeah. So we met Jurassic. We met Michael at Jurassic 2019. And now we totally clicked, and we are now collaborators. He made this incredible installation for our last show that we performed at ODC like 2 weeks before the lockdown. If you want to check it out, you can just go to kinetecharts.org, and there are some videos of AI Sensorium there. You can see the beautiful installations by Michael. But anyways, Michael, I'm just going to read your bio, and then we can get started. Yeah? Okay. Michael Koehle received his BA in art practice at UC Berkeley, his MS in biomedical engineering at UC Davis, and his MFA in studio art from Mills College. He has received residency grants from the Headland Center for the Arts, Autodesk Pier 9, and Jurassic. He's also the recipient of the General Prize in the UFAP Global Creative Awards in Japan and the Murphy and Cadogan Fellowship. Koehle lives and works in Oakland. I'll pass the ball to you, Michael.
Thanks, Ty. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate being able to talk and show art. I haven't had a chance to do that much in the last 2 years. Let me start sharing my screen. So I'm a visual artist. I work a lot with digital fabrication. And I also work for Autodesk at Pier 9 in their fabrication lab. I work with robotics. My background is kind of split between engineering and art. I studied mechanical engineering and art in undergrad. I finished in art, then went on to grad school for biomechanics, and then eventually back to Mills for an MFA. What I like about engineering, it was a way for me to understand the world a little bit better, how things work, how physics works. I wasn't really interested in making things. Like I wasn't interested in mechatronics or building physical things. That's kind of why I went into biomedical engineering. And what I like about engineering is kind of the problem solving, and also being able to write at like the correct solution. Unlike art, which is a lot more open-ended, and which is why I like that too. I love drawing. I did a lot of figure drawing and portraiture in undergrad. And after that, I think I'm missing a slide. Let's see. There we go. So after grad school in engineering, I worked for a startup called Otis Med. We made medical devices that would guide this total knee replacement surgery. If you don't know what that is, it's replacing the contact surfaces of the knee with metal and plastic. We would make this instrument based on a model of the patient's knee, so they're patient specific. So this little jig would fit on the bone and show the surgeon where to make their cuts and hopefully improve the outcome of the surgery. It was a startup, so I wasn't involved in a lot of that, programming, designing the guide, figuring out how to manufacture it, designing the cadaver labs. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that because some of this stuff will come up in my work later on. Man, PowerPoint, get it together. So while I was working, I was creating a portfolio to go back to MFA. I kind of always planned on doing that. I had seen a Rondi show in person, was just the way he treated objects. I kind of wanted to emulate that. Kind of like as if the objects had like a spirit, not really interested in realism, but just kind of getting like their physical presence on the canvas. So yeah, these are some of the paintings from that portfolio. And then when I got into Mills, I'd kind of taken a break from painting, and I was still working. I worked half-time while I was at Mills. So I couldn't get back into painting. So I started branching out and trying different things. When I was a kid, I would used to, I don't know if anyone else did this, but I would wrap my finger in like masking tape, like sticky side out, and then I'd wrap it again, sticky side down, kind of create this like glove or mold of it. So I started doing that with objects. I started with like stuff around my studio, scissors and bottles, and worked up from there. And then I went big and made this kind of copy of a lamppost. So I put the mold over the whole lamppost, cut it off, put it back together, and floated it with balloons. Here's some video of that. This is still one of my favorite things I've done. I haven't done much like it. If the only thing I would change if I went back is I would really like to just cut it loose and let it kind of fly out over the city. This is, I'm showing you this project because it's kind of the first time that engineering, that skill set ended up in my work. I don't think it's very good, but the critique went over well. The assignment was to use PowerPoint to tell a story. And this is the photography class. And my original idea wasn't working out. So I went to this. Programs like Word and Excel and PowerPoint have macro scripting that you can do in it to, the videos are playing a little bit crunchy. So this is kind of imagining a pathway, putting frames along that pathway, and then makes every slide of the PowerPoint like an animation still from that video. This kind of opened the doors for me to keep doing like engineering in my work. Somebody pointed out that it pretty much is just a screensaver. So it won't be the first time that I'll take kind of a long walk to get someplace not very far away. At work, I work with CNC machines. It's kind of a way of carving an object, removing material. It uses this end mill, kind of a spinning drill to carve away material. And you program it by making this tool path. It just kind of traces the object. This reminded me of blind contour drawing, where it's described as if an ant is kind of walking over somebody's like a figure or something. Your pencil should be tracing what that ant is doing. You're not supposed to look at your page. You're not supposed to be interested in the outcome. It's just kind of an exercise about keeping track of where you are in space. So this tool pathing reminded me of that. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to make a drawing with that. So I put a little LED light in the CNC machine and did these long exposure photos. So this is just tracing the object that it would machine. I thought these were cool. I kind of like the cobwebby effect, but they still looked very kind of digital and simulated. So I did a version of this myself, kind of a 3D contour drawing. So with my left hand, I would kind of trace an object. In my right hand, I'd have an LED light and just kind of try and make a copy of it, kind of displaced from the original. And it's really hard to do this. Like proprioception, your sense of space is not very exact. And I think the outcomes are interesting, but they're just kind of on the way to something else. So changed direction and decided to paint the object directly. So I used this LED fiber optic brush to kind of block in the space around an object. And make these kind of drawings. So for 2 or 3 minutes, I would just kind of trace around the object, made dozens of these and just picked a few that I thought were successful. I was missing some color information from this. So I wrote a program that would kind of combine that with a regular photo. It would use that light drawing as a mask and pull color information from this photo. So I did a couple of pieces in that way. I liked about these, they kind of had a drawing sense to them. It was kind of a way of faking a drawing. At work, I looked at a lot of MRIs, just of different patients. I spent a lot of time doing that. What I liked about this MRI process is you can kind of slice through these volumes in different directions, like front, side to side, top to bottom. They also read as an animation to me. This is a CT scan of a basket. So it's just kind of like this swarm of particles. So I had the idea, and I thought this was a really good idea to do that with video. So I would stack in kind of virtually the frames of a video, and then I would carve through it in the other direction. So your video frame would now be on this right side. So time is the horizontal axis, and you're moving through space as the video plays. So these are some of those. It's just kind of made this like strange terrain. And I just did like different actions around my studio. This is just me walking, me jumping, just trying to get a sense of what was happening. Like the faster you are moving, the less like horizontal space you're taking up. I wanted to show one more from that. This one is just like kicking a stool around. It just kind of generates these kind of weird alien shapes. I tried to explain, I had a difficulty explaining to people how I kind of saw that video, so I made this kind of physical version of it. So 3D printed some stills from a video kind of stacked together, and and then had a friend who worked for a company that has a CT scanner scan this in and kind of play it back. So it's like a physical way of encoding a video. And so this is played normally, and this is kind of slicing through from the side. So like with time along the horizontal axis. So I had a studio visit with someone, she was a media artist, and she was not impressed. And she told me that this was a technique that had been around for decades. It's called slit scan photography. They have like TikTok apps that do this. And what I learned from that is, even if I think I discover like some new process, it's kind of not enough. Like it doesn't make it art. So you've got to do something, I don't know, the next step up to make it art. So these are some examples of more successful slit scan photography. The top one is actually kind of used for science. This is ocean waves, and since time is a horizontal axis, you can use this to kind of measure the amplitude of the wave, period of the wave. And then this bottom one is this art form, this man doing Tai Chi, and it's a really kind of mesmerizing, beautiful video. So I abandoned that kind of video method because it had been done, and also just to get into a turning point in my life. This startup that I've been working at for 7 years got in trouble with the FDA years ago in 2014, or this happened pretty early on, the event that triggered this lawsuit, but the FDA told us to stop selling our guide. And that day we still shipped out 200 guides. I guess the CEO decided to do that. And several years later, that ended up in this lawsuit coming to a head and shutting down our company. The CEO went to jail for a couple of years. And I was kind of put out by that. I'd put a lot into that company, felt personally invested. And so I stopped working for a while. The upside of that was I could focus on my art. I also inherited a laser scanner or a laser cutter and a CNC machine from that place. And for the work I do, like I feel really lucky. It doesn't just take like that kind of an engineering skill set. It also takes access to these pretty expensive pieces of equipment. So having like a decent, I had savings and to kind of live on. I took a break. I focused on artwork, and what I focused on is this kind of this height map. I stumbled across this by accident once. I plotted a figure in this program I use, MATLAB, and you could, whatever command I chose, made it into this 3D kind of map, this surface. So what's going on here is any part where there's white in this gradient is high. It's got like a tall Z depth. And any place where it's black, it's low and shallow. I just liked how contingent that was and what a surprise it was. So the rest of the work I'm going to show you is trying to kind of build that object. And so I tried a bunch of different ways. This is kind of just to illustrate more about the height map. So anywhere there's a black pixel, it's going to be low. Anywhere there's white, it's going to be tall, and the grays are in between. And I think what I like about this is there's kind of a rhyme in real life. Like the ocean gets darker with depth. An X-ray gets lighter, like the thicker it is. Shadows can gradate over kind of the depth of a cross section or of a, like these blinds. So my first version of this was kind of the X-ray version of it. So I just made an object where the thicker part would be white and the more shallow part would be black. So this is a height map of a wave, an ocean wave. And when you take a CT scan of it, and this video, I'm just kind of starting at the bottom and summing all the slides. It develops back into that original photograph. I think that's pretty resolved. So once you have it in the computer as this kind of volume, you can take images of it in different directions. So this is the kind of the side view of that relief. And this is just kind of a 3/4 view. I would show these photos with the object, but I don't think people kind of made the connection. And it's kind of a stretch to link it between this kind of photo. This is like the dead-on X-ray or CT scan. And the actual like 3D printed object. They kind of were reading it as separate. And then I realized that like X-rays work because pretty much everything is transparent to an X-ray, but there's materials that are transparent to visual light. So I started working with these kind of 2-layer height maps where I was relying on this transparent upper layer to create the grayscale of the image. So this is an example of that. So this is a relief. And again, the parts that show up darker, they're deeper parts of the relief, and the parts that are lighter are more shallow, so there's less water to see through, and that's why it appears brighter. And this is another just kind of early version. One of the first things I did with it, borrowed an image from Chuck Close, and this is actually Jello. This is gelatin. And this is kind of more of a finished version of it. I made this kind of into I don't know, a water feature where the water would drain out and then refill. So there's kind of a sweet spot where the image is revealed, and then the more water drains, the image kind of disappears. And then when the water fills back up, it obscures the image. It just becomes too black. And then this is a 3D printed version of that same idea. This is an object printer that prints in resin and can do really high resolution. So the base layer of the print is just kind of a flat white that's kind of shown by this rectangle at the bottom. And then the grayscale comes from, the bottom in this case is black. It's a black layer of resin. And then the top layer is white. And so where the white is thicker, it becomes more opaque, and that's where like the highlights are. And where the white is thinner, then more of the black shows through. I tried to do a full color version of this. This was tricky and I never got it quite right, but I would mix cyan pigment, magenta pigment, and yellow pigment into resin. I'd start with a base layer of white, machine away what I didn't want, then pour cyan resin, do another machining process, magenta, machine, yellow, and create this kind of depth. So yeah, it's a subtractive color model. When the colors combine, you can get these different gradations of color. It was just a hard process to get down right. This is an attempt to recreate a photo of, well, you'll see it what it is, but this is kind of the magenta layer machining it on this router that we have at Pier 9. So this is the first layer, cyan on white, and then magenta and cyan. And then this is the full color version, just kind of a sunset cloud. I spent a lot of time on this process, but it didn't really read any different from a photo to me. And yeah, as kind of, again, taking a really long walk to get to someplace pretty close. So I've kind of let that drop. I would like to get back into it again. I think maybe glass or something else would be a better material. And so this next kind of version of these height maps is kind of closer to the original. I'll just get into it. So for this version, I stacked up hundreds of layers of house paint, going from black to gray to white. And then I would machine into it to reveal a photo. So this is kind of a roughing first pass, and then more detailed. And yeah, the finished product. Another one of just kind of a battleship explosion. And then this is kind of the scaled up version. This is resin layers in black to gray to white, and then machining into it. So something like 40 hours of machining to create this. And this is kind of the finished product. This is a satellite image of this kind of cloud formation called a vortex street. And yeah, just making it a relief. I like this, but it's still kind of missing something. I think maybe it's not deep enough, so it's not kind of contingent enough on the person's point of view. Still haven't figured that one out either. Kind of the next version of that height map is to take cross sections, kind of like a CT scan is made up of cross sections, and kind of stacking them together to form the image. So this kind of first version is. This is like a simulation of it. The photograph I started off with. So kind of the same thing again, grayscale, but full color. And to do that, where the height is based on grayscale, but kind of the full color version of it. To do that, I sliced up, this is a source image, into kind of dark to light values. So I would print these on acrylic. This is like mid-tone, higher up. So I think I did around 12 of these. This is one of those prints. And then I put it in an acrylic box and I filled it with mineral oil. The mineral oil is so that it has an index of refraction really close to the acrylic. So it kind of reads as one object. You can actually see the fill line in the middle where that mineral stops. This is a close-up of that, kind of these stacks of color. And then another version of this is kind of vertical strips. So you can see here, this is just a gradient printed out on paper. And I would cut them up as like cross sections of that height map. So again, black is shallow, the whites are higher. And then it would kind of string those together to make this portrait. So from the left side, you can see the grayscale values. From the white side, it's just blank paper. After doing that, I realized I didn't actually need the printed gradients. They would read okay as just the paper itself had enough of a shadow that contrasted to the background, you could see an image in it. And I liked how it was kind of a surprise, and there's only kind of one way to see this correctly. The next version of this is I took those kind of vertical gradient strips and just kind of folded them over on their side. So kind of skews the image from left to right. And I chose imagery that that kind of skewing would fit the image. So this is a wave exploding over a seawall, and that kind of left to right skewing kind of mirrors that. And I like, yeah, I feel like these are the most successful version of this. This is another wave breaking over the seawall. This time the strips are horizontal to kind of get the energy going upward. And this is more about the process. This is a cloud street over the Bering Strait. Just kind of a weird cloud formation. And so I wrote vector lines that would kind of result in a kind of an energy following that flow of that cloud formation. And so this is kind of a mid-process shot, and this is the finished product. And this is a satellite image of a hurricane, and this is my last image, is another cloud, another wave, just from a storm. And that is my last image. I have some of this work up right now at Jack Fisher Gallery, if you would like to see it in person. That will be up through the end of August.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I would like to unmute people, but I'm a little, I'm just going to like move on quickly. I'm going to send you guys all the link here. I can feel your vibe. Everyone here is happy, excited. Thank you.
Michael, can you give a little bit of detail about your current exhibition?
Yeah, it's 12 of those kind of paper relief pieces. They're of ocean waves or of satellite images of cloud formations or hurricanes. I don't know, what else would you like to know about it?
Yeah, well, how do people find the location? Is there a website?
Alex just posted a link to it. It's Jack Fisher Gallery. It's one of the Minnesota Street Project galleries.
Yep, it's in the chat. So yeah, take a look.
It's in San Francisco. It's in the what's the area called?
Dog Patch.
Dog Patch. Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful gallery space. I recommend everybody go.
Yeah, please do.
And you notice there's a lot of 3D-ness to this work, and so I feel like we're only getting the 2D version, but some sense of it. So going in person is very valuable. So thank you, Michael. Thank you for sharing. We're going to move quickly on to our next presentation. We're a little bit behind. I'm going to pass it on to Wei, actually, to introduce Mariel.
Well, I have the pleasure to introduce Mariel. Well, Mariel is brilliant, as everybody can see. She's both a dancer and a physicist, and she's deep into AI research and practice. So Mariel graduated from, got her PhD from Yale University. She was a Chamberlain postdoctor. She is a Chamberlain postdoctor researcher at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. That's up on the hill, right above Berkeley. She develops custom AI tools for high energy particle physics and astrophysics. Since 2017, she has also led independent teams of researchers using AI to generate choreography based on 3D motion capture of her own movements. This is extremely fascinating. How do you use AI and movement together? I mean, luckily, we have Mariel as both a dancer and AI researcher and a physicist. Like one thing the physicist loves to do is building models to try to explain everything. So I love to hear Mariel's interpretation or like summarizing, theorizing of everything. As a performing artist, she used theater and dance to research audience activation, duration, power, self-documentation, technology, authenticity, fear, and playfulness. So I'm gonna hand over to Mariel. I'm looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks, Wei. And thanks, Michael. Oh my gosh, that was so fantastic. I have a bunch of questions for you after this. So I'll try to go quickly so we can get to the Q&A portion, because I think that'll be fun. So feeling like this talk is going to be a little academic and hopefully not too dry in contrast. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariel, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. So as a form of introduction, here's part of my life, which is my life as a physicist with the ATLAS experiment at CERN. So CERN is the site of the Large Hadron Collider, which is the world's largest particle accelerator. And the ATLAS detector, which is my experiment of the last decade, basically, is this massive detector. I don't know if you can even see in this image, there's two people that are illustrated here for scale, like 6 stories tall, whose purpose is to analyze particle collisions and try to tell us more information about the fundamental building blocks of the universe. So my job here at Berkeley Lab is as a postdoc in the Machine Learning for Fundamental Physics division, and this is a pretty new group that's been founded. And I love that it's kind of intentionally vague in its description, fundamental physics. That includes high energy physics, particle physics, that also includes astrophysics and potentially other interdisciplinary collaborations that might be able to help us understand our universe more broadly. And then other important context for my talk is that I also have an extensive background in performing arts, and that includes theater and dance as a choreographer, dancer, director, actor, that sort of thing. So over the past few years, I'd say about 5 years, I've been able to use motion capture technology to capture my movements and then use my data analysis tools from my science life to sort of analyze my movements through the lens of a scientist. So very broadly, what I'll be chatting with you all about today is this intersection of machine learning and choreography that I found myself becoming a part of over the past few years. And before I get into some of the techniques that I've worked on, I just want to start by mentioning, why would this even be a good idea in the first place, or an interesting idea? And I think it's important to say that by no means is this the first time that dance has intersected with technology. I think if you came to this event through Kinetech, that's probably clear to you. But in fact, there's this fascinating and rich history in modern, postmodern, and contemporary dance of using technologies, whether that means algorithms or equations or games of chance or even motion capture and more, to generate work that spans decades. So it's certainly not new to the dance world to use technology as a co-creative tool. And I just find it cool to be a part of this long history of dancers in this world thinking about technology and trying to engage with it. I'd say that my goal in this project when I first got started can be summed up with this quote by one of my favorite choreographers, Pina Bausch. I didn't want to imitate anybody. Any movement I knew I didn't want to use. So I was interested in whether AI could help me solve this issue that I frequently ran into, this sense of writer's block in the studio, that I think probably any creative type is pretty familiar with. This notion that when you're improvising, you find yourself kind of falling into a rut, going through the same movements. And of course, the dance world has many techniques to try to force yourself out of your comfort zone. But at the time, I was really building my toolkit in building AI models. And I just wanted to see what it would look like for an AI model to help push me outside of my comfort zone in the dance world while I was improvising. I didn't really know what this would look like. So I thought about what kinds of figures of merit I wanted to apply to the project, what success would look like. The first of these is the sense of realism. Could an AI model even create something that realistically looked like a human person dancing? And then I think, an additional step beyond that, if I was able to create something realistic, was to create something authentic that actually looked like something that I could have done in the studio. And then if I was able to achieve those two things, it would be amazing for this model to be able to surprise me, to really present me with something new. But sort of above all, my goal was to kind of evoke this notion that I think of with this painting here on the left by this painter Henri Michaud, who just wanted to evoke the desire to move. So even if these figures didn't look fully human necessarily, I just wanted them to make me want to move in a fresh and interesting way. So for some context, this was sort of the current state of the art of people thinking about AI and choreography when I started this project. And this was in about 2017. So what I'd say is that the themes between these two, this project called Core RNN on the left, and then this project on the right, which is a collaboration between the choreographer Wayne McGregor and Google, is that they took about 15 to 20 points on the human body. And based on the way that the movement was captured, it was fairly frontal, I guess, or two-dimensional in the sense that either it was taken from a single camera's perspective, or on the right, these movements were extracted from Wayne McGregor's video archives of his pieces. So I think the models had some difficulty in capturing full three-dimensional rotations of these different bodies. So we can contrast that with the quality of the data that I was able to access from the motion capture studio that was developed at my PhD institution. So all of a sudden I had access to this incredible data set that really had a lot of smoothness and had a multi-camera setup that you can kind of see here, this classic suit covered in ping pong balls that were highly reflective. This model was able to capture about 50 points on my body. Basically the next couple minutes, I'm just going to summarize two different research tracks that I went on over the next few years to sort of apply some new machine learning architectures to the generation of choreography using motion capture data. And it just occurred to me that I think I didn't share sound when I shared my slides. So I'm just going to reshare and make sure that that's enabled because I have a couple videos coming up. Okay, share sound, great. Cool, so the first project that I'll talk about is what's called a variational autoencoder. I probably don't have time to get into what that actually means, but all you need to know really about it is that this was a pretty dynamic team with many different specialties collected from my colleagues at CERN, from the digital humanities, and then with some friends who are choreographers and dancers who think about technology themselves. The summary of a variational autoencoder is that it's a generative model, and the generative properties emerge from the fact that it is concerned with reducing the dimensionality of your inputs. So this is kind of a cartoon of what that looks like, where if you were to give a variational autoencoder a handwritten digit, you would want it to be able to reconstruct the same input fairly effectively, with the caveat that the model has a highly reduced representation built into the middle. So it has this kind of bow tie shape to the model. So what this means is that the model has to, in this cartoon, learn how to represent all the complexities of a handwritten digit using only two numbers. And so a well-trained model, these two numbers will kind of capture the most relevant portions of that image and will give you a lot of information about your input data set. So early on, I had a work in progress piece. This is when I was only able to generate a single point on my body at a time. So I brought a couple of dancers on stage, and you can see this projection of just a single point. This was using this model to generate a trajectory for just a single point representing my torso. And so the dancers and I were improvising along these lines. But as the project matured, we were able to extend it to the full body. And in the following case, we were able to do a work in progress performance with my colleague Raymond, where he was actually wearing the motion capture suit and receiving live information from the model. So the model was telling him basically where in the latent space, this kind of reduced representation of his movement the model saw. And so he's sort of exploring the model's own vision of his movements and trying to understand which movements are kind of located closely together and which movements are further apart in the eyes of the model. So we were able to use this for some live performances. It's also fun just to look at the raw generated sequences that this model was able to create. So these are all kind of naively, randomly generated from this model. And I think, I mean, maybe you'll agree with me that I think for the most part, these look realistic, like a person. Maybe you'll have to trust me that many of them also feel authentic. And in many cases, they feel kind of surprising to me too. There's ways that I can hunt down particularly surprising movements. And so that's how I generated the following video, which is made of entirely generated movements, where I really tried to find the most surprising or the most unusual movements that I could collect. I probably don't have time for the whole video. Yeah, right. There's a lot of, makes you want to move like some of these bodies. So one kind of obvious application of the model that I trained was to generate new movements and either, put them together in a video like I did, or put them onto a human body like I showed. And that could have been kind of the end of the story in a sense. But what I loved about this research team is that we just wanted to keep going once we were able to train this model pretty satisfactorily. And what we spent a lot of time talking about was, okay, how do we know how to generate interesting movements? Like, it's almost like we're randomly searching this landscape that the model has learned about the dynamics of my movements. How do I find where the interesting stuff lies? And where we decided to start was to think about, where does my actual data lie according to the model? And maybe we can sort of look in those regions nearby my actual data to see some more novel, more interesting movements. So this is kind of exploiting this property that the model groups phrases of movements together that it sees as related. So this is kind of a cartoon of this, but these two sequences are both generated and they live close together according to the model. And you can kind of see that they have some similarities here, right? There's maybe they're all on all fours, and there's some sort of leg movement. And you can see another example of two related phrases here that to my eye have some relationships in terms of timing, in terms of orientation and rotation. So it's exploiting this property that we're able to sort of start from a real sequence and then deviate into something generated. So here's an illustration of what that means. So all of these dancers that you see here, the black is my actual motion capture data, and the blue is the model's generated version of this phrase. So it's almost like the model is echoing back the input phrase. And on the far left is the model's best representation of my input. And you can see that the model's pretty well trained because it's managed to capture most of the kind of important kinematic features of my movement. But the idea here is that maybe I don't ask the model to echo back the actual input data, but maybe instead I add some amount of noise to that original point, and I instead take a point that's nearby that original phrase, but is not exactly my actual data. And then I ask the model to tell me what it sees. And when that happens, we see a small amount of variation introduced. So it's a little subtle, but at the very end of this phrase, there's a bit of a deviation in the angle here of what direction the dancer is facing. So it's super subtle, and you can tune up kind of how dramatic you want the variation to look like. So that's what happens here on the far right, where as you move further and further away from that original phrase, you can still see some of the relationships between this movement and where we started, but sometimes it starts to become a little less clear, and the model starts to kind of do its own thing, inspired by that original phrase. And what I really like about this is that it's almost like having a studio assistant who's giving me different ideas for real phrases that I might find somewhat interesting, but maybe I want to play with it a bit. So for instance, this kind of small, simple movement, I might ask the model to give me a couple different options for what are some movements that are kind of expressing the same idea here, but are nevertheless something new. And I can kind of stare at these all day, to be honest, and sort of try to see what are the connections that I see between these two bodies, and why does the model see them as related? And in many cases, it's kind of a different story for each one. So it's using this idea of this relationship between my real data and the model's output that I generated the following video, which is a generated duet with myself using the same color scheme, where black is my real data and blue is the generated model. I'll pause that here. And I'll say that one other thing I really love about this is that, when I was taking the actual motion capture data, this was not like choreographed. I was just trying to take as much data as possible, basically, because I knew that AI models thrive on big data sets. So the improvisation that I was doing in the studio often felt kind of undirected, and it was pretty tedious, to be honest, just feeling like I had to keep moving. And using this model has allowed me to sort of revisit this movement that really wasn't coming from a place of joy at the time. And by creating this complement, turned it into this piece that feels like it has a lot more structure and maybe some depth to it. Okay, so I know this is a short talk. This is just a summary of the final project that's related to dance and AI that I worked on, which is sort of an extension, like the final extension of the work that I've just shown. And this is work that I did as an intern in Intel's AI department, summer of 2020. And I worked with these talented researchers. And together we were thinking about sort of where to go next in terms of the AI research component of this project. And something interesting we landed on is by thinking about how the model was actually perceiving the data. And really the way that the data is structured for the model that you've just seen, the AI model has no idea that it's actually looking at a body. It really just sees a bunch of points that are kind of smashed together through time. But there's not really an implicit structure that we give to the model. And something I'm really interested in my AI research is thinking about natural representations of data for AI models. Like how can we build in symmetries or like how the model or how the data wants to be seen in order to create better performance for the architecture or to inspire architectures that we haven't created before. So all that is to say is that we extended this previous project by adding a structure to the data that I use as an input. And in particular, we use this graph structure. So basically now, instead of just seeing a bunch of points, the model sees a bunch of points that have relationships between one another. And I was really interested in this idea as a dancer because it reflected to me what I actually think about when I'm dancing, which is often what's the relationship between, you know, my hips and my shoulders, or my head and my back, or, you know, these are the relationships that are actually defining how I move in the studio. And I was just very curious to see what this alien AI perspective would tell me that it sees in terms of those relationships. So here's an example of some of the relationships that this model discovered. The idea here is that edge type 0, I tell the model that it should put all the edges that sort of don't matter into this category. And then the edges that it decides do matter should be distributed between these final 3 edges. But I leave it up to the model to sort of make its own groupings in terms of like which relationships between different points on my body should be an edge type 1, which ones should be an edge type 2, which should be an edge type 3. And what do those relationships even mean? So what I plot here is the top 1% of the edges sort of representing each of these 4 different categories the model has defined. And you can probably see that the edges in pink here on the left from the no interaction category are kind of a smattering of different points. There's not really a clear pattern to the way that they're structured. But some of the other more meaningful edges actually do have a really distinct pattern. So for instance, this edge type 2, all of these edges are originating in my right hand and they extend to my left foot. And I found this super compelling because, to be honest, I sort of expected the model to maybe mostly just pick up on my skeletal structure instead of actually these like kind of far apart points on my body. Not to mention this idea kind of grounded in ballet of opposition of arms and legs. And it felt like the model had kind of discovered that on its own. And then edge type 1 in red, all of these edges originate in my left hand and they extend to different parts of my upper torso. And so it's interesting to think about how the model sees these relationships as distinct from the kinds of relationships guiding my right hand to my left foot. Yeah, another thing that I could spend hours thinking about. So I wish I could have a live performance to kind of show you all as a counterpoint to the AI research part of this, but this was all sort of done in COVID times. So I really haven't been able to put it on its feet yet. But the best that I could do was creating a TikTok account and generating a couple of videos while I was writing my thesis and needed a distraction. So I decided to try to explore some of the highly ranked relationships that the model had identified, and then some of the lowest ranked relationships that the model had identified to see how they felt. And on the left, what I'm playing with is one of the highest ranked connections. And this was between the top of my head and my right wrist. And I'm right-handed. And I've really found this to be really juicy and fun and playful and like a very natural way for me to think about generating new movements. So I had a lot of, it felt very, very fluid to play with that relationship. The relationship that I show here on the right, the sort of least important relationship in my movements is between my left toe and my left knee. And I've really struggled with this one. It's hard to really have that kind of variation when you have a bone connecting those things, right? So I kind of, in order to even make it possible for me to play with this, I extended it more broadly to thinking about the relationship between my feet and my knees. But in general, this felt super awkward and clunky. And so anecdotally, I felt like the model really did identify something real about what relationships were useful in guiding my movements and which relationships were not. And just to conclude with a couple takeaways of what I've learned kind of as an artist throughout this process is that sourcing the data of myself has been this really crucial and vulnerable part of that process. And in particular, I think for dance, this has been pretty significant because I've realized that I really don't have a lot of great records of myself dancing. I have a couple of videos, but sometimes you're in a live performance and there's always a camera person present, but you don't always get access to the video afterwards. And moreover, a video is just capturing that movement in that one moment when you were performing it. And I've started to kind of think of these trained models, the models themselves, as opposed to the outputs of the models, as these kind of they're very precious to me. This sense of like creative documentation or preservation. And I've also learned that, unlike in science where mistakes can kind of set you back and be a little annoying, in art, glitches can be really appealing. So I found that even the models that have not been trained all that well, or like are, making these wild predictions are still pretty amazing to watch. And, sometimes they can be pretty funny like these. But they can also be kind of just beautiful or sublime, like this one. So I've been so pleased to see the ways that these models can screw up along the way. And then last, I'll just leave you with this kind of landscape of how I've learned to think about my relationship between myself as an artist and the model. And this is just my own like personal framework that I sort of emerged over these few years, where the x-axis kind of defines if I'm thinking of the model as my friend or as not my friend. And that could mean kind of explicitly antagonistic, or that could just mean like detached. And then the y-axis is about who's making the creative decisions. Does it feel like I have the creative power, or does it feel like the model has the creative power? And you can kind of go through these different quadrants and sort of realize like the different kinds of dynamics that are set up from those different choices. And I'd say that I think the model or this project, I should say, has sort of spent time in maybe each of these quadrants at different points throughout the process. And it's something that I'm still kind of actively exploring. So with that, I'll just say thanks, and looking forward to chatting. Thanks.
Thank you. Wonderful work. I'm gonna allow people to, hold on, unmute themselves. Give me just a second. So I'm gonna open this up for Q&A for everyone to ask their questions here. So now, if you want to raise your hand, I'll pick on you, or you can just unmute yourself and you can ask these artist questions. Oh, but before we do that, actually, I'd like to ask Mariel and Michael if they have questions for each other, since this is the first time that they're seeing each other's work. So that's another really unique part of Y Exchange.
Yeah, sure. What are you going to do next?
Oh, I'm going to make a live performance. That's what I want to do the most. Yeah. That feels like sort of the third act that I think I would really like to try to explore. And so I'm sort of, I think at times it's felt like the comfort zone of this project has been the research component of it, the AI component. And so now that I'm back in the space of thinking about how to actually translate these movements onto human bodies again, it feels vulnerable again. Like, I don't know where to go with it. It's hard to think about, like, should I really be trying to just imitate these directly? Can I use them just as creative inspiration? But I also love the real data, and like the real data is kind of essential to it. So I'm playing around with those questions right now about how to translate them onto a body, and especially how do I translate the movements that are unphysical onto the body.
Do you think the model will be like the kind of that digital model will be represented somewhere, or will it be just real people dancing?
My instinct is that I want the performance to just look like humans dancing. But of course, the framing of this is pretty important to the story. And when I've presented this work before, it has felt like a kind of blend of like an academic talk and a performance and something else. So right now I'm thinking it might start looking like an academic talk, and then hopefully we'll kind of like explode into something else. But I'm not totally sure how to represent the model or to give the model a presence in the performance either.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you. My question for you, Michael, I have a few. Let's see which one I want to do. Okay, so I have a question about how you see like what's the distinction in your mind between like data visualization and kind of like giving the photographs and the objects that you care about kind of their own life in the way that you've done? Do you see it as visualization? Do you see it as like exploring different volumetric shapes or interpretations?
I think I don't want it to read as a data visualization. Like, I think I don't want people to look at it and think, oh, that was generated by a computer, or it's, I don't know, representing a collection of data. Like, I'd like it to take it far away, or make it, and I think some of this is just making it like physical and making it have like a three-dimensional shape. I think some of that might help. But yeah, I'd like to have it read as I don't know, not quite handmade, not quite like digitally made, fabricated, but somewhere in the middle.
That makes sense to me. To me, it's totally successful along those lines too. Like especially the textures that you choose, like gelatin and water and or tape or these different materials. Yeah, it's not just a direct translation. It seems like it's somewhere in the middle. Cool.
Thanks.
Did you have any other questions, Mariel? We can open it up to the group here.
Well, I guess my other main question is like, I don't know, like I sort of framed my research as like the solution to a problem, right? Where like the problem is that I fall into a creative rut when I'm improvising. And I'm wondering if, Michael, if you've seen your work as responding to a problem about something that's lacking from a 2D image that like you want to like break it out somehow, or if you see it, or maybe it's not about solving a problem.
I think it is solving a problem, and it's I feel like it's a problem I've assigned myself. I think it's kind of an indirect way of working, and so there'll just be something I'm curious about, or kind of like a what if kind of question, and then I kind of have to make it to see what the answer to that is. Yeah, I think it's just curiosity to see what that would look like. Or, yeah, what would happen if I did that?
Okay, I'm gonna let other people raise their hand or open the discussion. Okay, let's do Hannah and then Wei, and then Kurt.
I have a question to Mariel. Do you see what is the future of it, and do you see a full-blown dance that also includes other dances, and how much would it complicate the intervention or cooperation with your virtual tool or AI?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, like one of my success metrics of the project was to what extent does the movement that's generated make me actually want to move? And I think actually the project has not been as successful along those lines because I've become so infatuated with the generated movers, and it sort of feels like I can't even like attempt to do what they're doing. Like there's so much going on with them that It's actually been a lot harder than I expected to bring it back onto bodies. And so I think that's why I want that to be the next phase of this project, is to really figure out how to like not be so wrapped up in just the generated data itself, and to instead have it actively inform how different people are moving. In terms of the research too, I would really love to be able to extend this to analyzing duets or groups, in terms of thinking, I mean, not only relationships between different parts of one body and figuring out how that guides movement, but also if you could sort of visualize like, you know, these like kind of electric connections between people while they're collaborating. I think that would be fascinating to see as a way of guiding how multiple people interact. But yeah, I think the next phase is definitely thinking about a live performance, and then figuring out how to break outside of the structure of just the generated data and letting the data speak for itself.
Okay, so data seems to be very cold. So how do you add the emotional component to it? And can it hold it? Can it take the emotional and add to it? Because many of the dances are expressive.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's something I'm still exploring. The way that I've approached that in the past has been to make it an intensely personal presentation, because it's my data and it's these models that I've built, and I think about how it kind of exposes some fears that I have about getting injured or aging, or like my body changing such that I can't dance in the same way that I have access to right now. And so in that sense, like the documentation aspect of these models becomes pretty significant. Or thinking about like jealousy of these models, the idea that like they're not gonna get tired and grumpy like I did in the studio taking data, I think there's like more of a personal relationship between me and the models that I've trained that I've tried to evoke in the storytelling of the piece. And this is another challenge, is like how much of the performance is about me building the models, and then how much of the performance is just the dance and the movement. So we'll see where I land.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I volunteer just in case you need a dancer. Wei. I'm gonna pass it on to Wei.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have fantastic talks, both of you, because it's mesmerizing. I have a question for both of you, but I guess like saving, giving the time limit, I'll just like for now just ask a question for Michael. Michael, you said a couple of things that I like really get me thinking. One of the things you said is it take long walk to somewhere close. It's really interesting because in this modern day life, we everything we talk about is the efficiency, is the speed. Like we get stuck in the traffic, gets really frustrated. If we can get from point A to point B in the record time, we something's wrong. So I really wanted to listen you kind of dive a little bit deeper of like what do you experience, what do you learn from the practice of taking a long walk to somewhere close?
Well, when I take that long walk, it's because I didn't realize that it was so close. Like I didn't realize I was doing like a slit scan video. I like that had been, I mean, I'm sure I must have seen one, but I just didn't know that that's where I was headed. So it's like you're going for a hike in the wilderness and you end up like at a McDonald's and there's a highway going to the McDonald's. So I'd like, I enjoyed the walk, and I learned, something by doing that process, but it's just kind of disappointing to like, oh, this is where I wound up. Like, it's a signal to me that I need to kind of drop that line of, I don't know, inquiry and move on to something else.
Well, I personally, I felt like there's a lot of learning and discovery experience you acquired through this long walk. I felt like what's really like a strike chord to me is like the ability to take time, not to be rushed, not having a goal. So this is why I really like what you're saying. I felt like this is a great way of a practice.
Thanks. Some of that comes out of just being kind of naive about this type of art. Like I didn't start off doing kind of technical or digital art, and if I was more in those circles, I think I would have known some of these things and not. Part of the reason why I left painting, it was just such a crowded field, and there's just so much that had already been done, and it's just hard to like, I don't know, find something for yourself to do. And the way I work now, I don't feel that way, and so I kind of don't want to know what's out there.
To me, that's very important. Not knowing is very important.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's, I don't know. I think it's kind of lazy in a way, and it's your job to like keep your finger on what's happening. But I think I'm happier not knowing.
I'm going to pass it on to Kurt, and then we have Jaren as well after Kurt.
So yeah, Michael, I feel like a similar importance. Like I feel so much depth and importance in all the things that I hear you're considering discarding or not, maybe not harvesting from. You know, and like if you look at your whole process with that and put it into one of your own time slit, or whatever it should be, whatever you were calling it, that basically you look at that and it makes a substance. That's the main thing I'm getting from all of this, is that photography, and digital photography and digital printing, digital color printing and so forth, they're all very, like the definition of things and the way the pixels are is according to the convenience of manufacture and regularity. And you've taken and put some substance back into the process of making a full color representation. That's already fantastic. And to me, that art, artistically, just photography itself could completely bloom from having something that thick and rich as a substantial something, that isn't just RGB pixels that have been, at some resolution, anti-aliased for the most optimal result, that you actually have something sitting there that you could put your finger into that made that color. I like that really a lot, for example. But if I look at everything you said, I have the same kind of response. And so I just feel like there's a lot there. And I think it's a cultural phenomenon to when the artist feels the need to meet the modern fast world. I think that, so I went like in the way with Way on that. And I won't say anymore because I want to say, Mariel, like I'm switching, right, to not take too much time. AI can really bug me, but I wasn't at all bugged by where AI sits in your process that I hear it, which feels very lively to me. The way it feeds back and the way you personalize it and the way you're aware of that personalization as an artist. And but there's one layer of it that also doesn't have the AI that interests me, which is the first layer of taking the points and then you make the rendering. Just the simple choice of how you render that, where you put lines, where you left points. And that was already really interesting to me. For example, we had like the arm was a line, but I don't know, there were points around it. And there was almost more of a sense of dimensionality in the space from where the points didn't have explicit connection. And so I'm thinking there's something about the rendering of that that's really important, and that like I understand dancing somewhat from the inside too, and like practices like Ohad, what he brings in with the dimensionalizing bodily perception. And I feel like when I look at your things, and you said I could look at these for hours, and I feel like, oh, this is really interesting. I feel entirely different bodily having looked at the way those points move. And I think if you had no AI involved and you were just, I'm not saying you shouldn't do the AI, but just that layer of it is already really interesting. And like in your choices of things, and to be inspired, like if I were a researcher, maybe I would like try different pointillizations, however you call that, and then like run some dancers through some process with that and see which ones produce the highest like delta waves or something in the brain at the end of the session or something. I don't know which one it is, but I feel like there's something there, and there's something about how detail creates, like, awakens different layers of perceptual process. And so I see that in what you're doing.
Thanks for saying that. I've struggled a lot with the visualizations of this data. And part of that is from the motion capture suite itself, which is really designed for like video game applications. And so, I'm like restricted, at least in the data that I've collected so far, in terms of what does this video game company decide what are the important parts of the body to capture, right? And it doesn't really feel that faithful to like the parts that are actually the most important necessarily. Like it captures like one point to represent my whole core, which is like where most of my movement is coming from sometimes. So I've struggled with the original source of the data, as well as you've said, how to connect these points to make them feel textured and dynamic and like a real person. And, some people have told me that I need to like put a 3D character on it, or, that like it's too simple, but I love the simplicity. So I really, I've gone all over the place in terms of thinking about how to visualize it. So yeah, it's an interesting trajectory too.
Awesome. And we have one final question for the evening, but I'm also going to just say, because we're going to end pretty soon, stay tuned with Kinetic Arts, all of our events on our website and on our meetup. And if you have anything, personal you want to say to us, you can always reach out to us at kineticarts.org. And that's all in the chat. Now I'm going to pass it on to Jaren, and we'll have this be the last question for tonight.
All right, I'm sneaking in a last question. I love both y'all's presentations, Michael. That was a wild ride. It was like being on a roller coaster. Mariel, I have a quick question for you since we're low on time. At one point in your presentation, you had this kind of y-axis for how much noise was being introduced to the model, and it was kind of fun seeing how you can just like tweak a knob or adjust a slider and change the personality of your AI model. And I think like with a synthesizer, like a musical instrument, if I have like something I really like, I'll save a preset for it and I'll come back to it, and I'll have all these presets that I like that have like certain moods. Do you find with your model that you've come up with like presets of dancers, like, oh, this is Fred dances this way, and this is Olga or Miguel, and you have different people that you can duet with?
This is an awesome question, and the answer is that I haven't, because the dimensionality of the space, like the way that my model sees the data, has 256 dimensions. And so when I take a step in that direction, it's a combination of those 256 vectors, and I really just haven't broken down all of them to figure out really what they capture or which ones have some interesting dynamics to them. But I think it's something I've wondered, is like, I really feel like I'm naively going through the space. And so if I were to try a really super reduced representation, maybe if there's only like 8 or 10 or 16, maybe I could start to actually pick apart what the model's seeing along those dimensions.
Cool.
Yeah. Really quick, Mariel and Alex and I, we at the Kinevist, we do specific graph visualization. I'd love to see your data, and I'd love to see this like reduced connectivity, like or like filter out to surface high connectivity or low connectivity, and see how it look. Like, we need to talk later.
Nice. Yeah, let's do it.
This was incredible work, you guys. If you guys want to unmute yourselves, give some sound. I love to hear that, it gives the human touch. Mariel, Michael, these were some wonderful, inspirational performances. If you want to get in contact, please reach out to us. And I'll send up the recording after this. So stay tuned. So we'll have another one of these talks next month. And we're very excited to have you all. Have a good night.
Thanks for hosting, Alex.
Bye, guys.
Thanks everyone
guys.
for showing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Ciao.